Module 12.2. 12-2. How did Piaget, Kohlberg, and later researchers describe adolescent cognitive and moral development? We develop new abstract thinking tools. This is formal operations, according to Piaget. We can reason hypothetically and deduce the consequences. We can detect inconsistencies in others' reasoning, sometimes leading to heated debates with parents and silent vows to never lose sight of their own ideals, and they reason logically and develop moral judgment. There are several different theories regarding moral reasoning and developing morality. Jean Piaget, children's moral judgments build on their cognitive development. Lawrence Kohlberg agreed, but he sought to describe a moral reasoning that develops in universal sequence to guide moral actions, and Kohlberg's theory is really more applicable to adults, adolescents and adults, and Piaget is more applicable to children. Jonathan Haidt described moral intuition. Much of morality is rooted in moral intuitions that are made quickly and automatically, and moral action is that our moral action feeds moral attitudes. Walter Mischel defined the ability to delay gratification as linked to more positive outcomes in adulthood, and this is a challenge in today's world because we find ourselves more and more seeking instantaneous gratification. Especially with the advent of the internet, where we have information, we can shop, we can do things that previously required a little bit of a slower pace and delay, as we may have had to travel to a library or travel to a store to purchase a good or item. This chart outlines Lawrence Kohlberg's levels of moral thinking. He divides into three specific levels: pre-conventional morality, which is before the age of 9. Conventional morality is early adolescence, and post-conventional morality is adolescence and beyond. In pre-conventional morality, the focus is on self-interest, obeying rules to avoid punishment or gain concrete rewards. An example is if you save your dying wife, you'll be a hero. In conventional morality, this is a focus on upholding the laws and rules to gain social approval or maintain social order. If you steal the drug for her, everyone will think you're a criminal. So you can see in this case, there's really a focus on upholding the law and rule. Even if the person really needed the drug, the morality is really focused on the fact that doing so is wrong based on the rule. In post-conventional morality, actions reflect a belief in basic rights and self-defined ethical principles. People have a right to live, and this can actually probably violate specific laws and rules, even if it is illegal. Someone may decide that they just say, well, this is more important than the rule. Module 12.3. So 12-3, what are the social tasks and challenges of adolescence? Adolescence is a struggle that involves identity versus role confusion, a struggle that continues into adulthood. Identity versus role confusion is one of these psychosocial stages of development, according to Erik Erikson. During the stage, we focus on developing our identity, which is our sense of self. And according to Erikson, the adolescent's task is to solidify a sense of self by testing and integrating various roles. Our social identity involves the we aspect of self-concept that comes from group memberships. Healthy identity formation is followed by a capacity to build close relationships. And there's a caveat to this, because this may depend partially on a person's personality style or personality type. So we may expect people to develop extroverted behaviors and therefore seek out membership in multiple groups. And we might see that as a way that we might be forming healthy identity. But the same could be true for introverts who may form bonds with smaller groups or one social group that is just as effective as developing their identity. Intimacy, in Erikson's theory, is the ability to form close, loving relationships, and a primary developmental task in young adulthood. And the next stage after identity versus role confusion in Erikson's theory is intimacy versus isolation, which occurs in young adulthood, through approximately the early 40s. So when we look at adolescence and the social development and forming an identity, we can look at this chart, which gives the approximate ages and the stages of Erikson's theory. So what Erikson believed is during each stage, the individual is confronted with a psychosocial crisis. It is their job to get out of that stage to resolve that crisis. And if they decide not to resolve the crisis, they enter what's called a psychosocial moratorium, where they remain in that stage until they can resolve the crisis. So in the first stage, which is infancy to 1 year, the issue is trust versus mistrust. The description of such a task or the issue is, if needs are dependently met, infants will develop a sense of basic trust. And we saw what will happen if their needs are not met, and what the deprivation that might occur. They actually might develop mistrust of others. Toddlerhood, which is 1 to 3 years, the issue is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Toddlers learn to exercise their will and do things for themselves, or they doubt their abilities. Preschool is 3 to 6 years, and initiative versus guilt. Preschoolers learn to initiate tasks and carry out plans, or they feel guilty about their efforts to be independent. And an easy example of this is if a child has cereal in the morning, dry cereal in the morning, and wants to pour the milk themselves, as well as carry the bowl maybe from the kitchen to the table. It would be easy for an adult to try to hinder that task by saying, no, you're going to spill the milk. But actually, if the child were allowed to complete the task, it would help them determine or develop their sense of initiative, as well as effort to be independent. And all the adult would have to do is say that you did a great job. And even if the child spilled milk, the best way to go about it would be just to clean up the milk silently and not even mention that it was spilled. Elementary school is 6 years to puberty. This is competence versus inferiority. Children learn the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks, or they feel inferior. This can be challenging because children are at different levels of development. They may understand certain tasks more quickly than others, and therefore they may develop a sense of competence or inferiority depending on where they compare themselves with their peers. In adolescence, the teen years into the 20s, we talk about identity versus role confusion. Teenagers work at reflecting a sense of self by testing roles and integrating them to form a single identity, or they become confused about who they are. This is where when you have children who are teenagers or in adolescence and they want to experiment with different things, I think it should be encouraged but guided by parents, as we want to make sure that the child never puts themselves at risk, but they also have the opportunity to experience or explore different identities as they consolidate them into a single identity when they resolve the crisis at this stage. Young adulthood, 20s to early 40s, is marked by intimacy versus isolation. Young adults may struggle to form close relationships and to gain the capacity for intimate love, or they feel socially isolated. Middle adulthood, 40s to 60s, is generativity versus stagnation. In middle age, people discover a sense of contributing to the world, usually through family and work, where they may feel lack of purpose. And the lack of purpose would be the sense of stagnation, where their contributions to their family and work would be generativity. And if a person feels a sense of generativity at this stage, they are more often likely to give back to others, either through volunteering or coaching, teams, whatever it may be. If they're parents, the generativity, the person feels that they have been rewarded in life and they would want to give back. And late adulthood is late 60s and up, and this is the last stage in Erikson's theory, and it's ego integrity or integrity versus despair. At this point, the individual starts to reflect on his or her life, and an older adult may feel a sense of satisfaction or integrity or failure or despair. Now, this can have impacts on our health, and it also has a strong sense of regret that we may feel if we realize we didn't live the life we had hoped, or we didn't feel like the life that we lived was as valuable as it could have been. I always recommend to students, if you could fast forward to the last stage, what would you want to do from this point forward to be able to resolve the future stages successfully? And now that you're armed with this knowledge, how could it help you going forward? Module 12.4. 12-4. How do parents and peers influence adolescents? Parent and peer relationships are very important. People seek to fit in with and are influenced by their groups, especially during childhood and teen years. The influence of parents and peers is complementary. With parents, they may see that their parent-child arguments increase, but most adolescents report liking their parents. Argument content is usually over mundane things and tends to be greater with firstborn than with secondborn children. However, peers influence behavior the most. Social networking is often extensive, and exclusion can be painful or worse. Parents are more important when it comes to education, discipline, charitableness, responsibility, orderliness, and ways of interacting with authority figures. Peers are more important for learning cooperation, for finding the road to popularity, for inventing styles of interaction among people of the same age. The end of adolescence is marked by emerging adulthood. So what is emerging adulthood? It includes the time from about age 18 to the mid-20s, when in many Western cultures, young people are no longer adolescents, but have not yet achieved full independence as adults. They are in a not yet settled phase of their life. It can be characterized by not yet assuming full adult responsibilities and independences, and by feelings of being in between an adolescent and an adult. It may involve living with and being emotionally dependent upon parents. And this is a stage of transition as they start to finish college, maybe get a job in the field that they've studied, and start to establish their adult life. And this brings us to the end of Module 12. Module 13 actually discusses adulthood, where we review the end of Erikson's stages of development, as well as a little more about moral development according to Kohlberg. I hope you've enjoyed the module, and I look forward to seeing you in Module 13.